You asked ChatGPT something today. Maybe directions, maybe help with an email. Maybe you just wanted to know something random. And while you were waiting those 2 seconds for an answer, somewhere in Virginia or Arizona or Iowa, a building the size of several city blocks quietly drank a bottle of water. Just for you. Now multiply that by 1 billion people every day. That's not a metaphor, that's what's actually happening. And nobody's really talking about it. Most people picture AI as something that lives in the cloud, like it's just floating out there, weightless, clean, invisible. But there's no cloud, there's just a building. A very large, very hot, a very thirsty building called a data center. Inside that building are thousands of servers, essentially specialized computers stacked floor to ceiling, running 24 hours a day, generating enormous amounts of heat as they process your requests. And that heat has to go somewhere. So they cool it with water. Here's how it works. Water gets pumped through the facility, absorbs the heat from the servers, and then, in most systems, gets released into the atmosphere through evaporative cooling towers. You've seen them. They're the towers outside industrial plants that breathe white vapor. The key word there is evaporates. That water doesn't get recycled back into the supply, it's gone. Even a mid-sized data center consumes as much water as a small town. The largest ones can require up to 5 million gallons every single day, equivalent to a city of 50,000 people. And there aren't dozens of these facilities, there are thousands, and they're getting bigger, faster than at any point in history. Let me give you some actual numbers because this is where it gets hard to process. According to researchers at UC Riverside, every 100-word AI prompt uses roughly 1 bottle of water, about 519 milliliters. 1 bottle per prompt. In 2025, global data centers consumed just under 1 trillion gallons of water. AI workloads accounted for about 200 billion of those gallons, equivalent to 300,000 Olympic swimming pools. And that's now. By 2030, AI's share is projected to roughly double, to 600 billion gallons. That's enough water to supply 500 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. Let me put a corporate face on this, because these aren't abstract numbers. They belong to specific companies. Google's data center water consumption went from 4.3 billion gallons in 2021 to 6.1 billion gallons in 2024. Their largest single facility in Council Bluffs, Iowa, withdraws an average of 3.9 gallons of water per day. One building in Iowa, 3.9 million gallons a day. For context, that's more than the entire city of Des Moines uses in a day. And Google isn't alone. Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, they're all running these facilities at scale. And the AI boom means all of them are building more faster. Here's where the story gets darker. You would assume that companies building water-intensive infrastructure would at least have the sense to locate it somewhere with abundant water. Near rivers, near lakes, somewhere wet. US AI data centers are building it in drought zones. Arizona, Texas, Nevada, some of the most water-stressed regions in the country. Why? Because land is cheap, power is available. Local governments offer massive tax incentives to bring in construction dollars and the jobs. And the companies that build these facilities can often negotiate water access agreements before anyone in the community knows what's coming. Google's data center in Mesa, Arizona holds a permit to use 5.5 million cubic meters of water per year. Roughly the same amount used by 23,000 ordinary Arizonans. And drought hasn't slowed their plans for a second facility there. Researchers in Texas found that data centers in that state will use 49 billion gallons of water in 2025, with projections as high as 399 billion gallons by 2030. Enough to draw down Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States by more than 16 feet in a single year. These aren't science fiction projections, they are peer-reviewed estimates, and the communities affected by this are starting to fight back. Nearly 70% of Americans now say they oppose data center construction in their communities. Water and electricity consumption are the two main reasons cited. Towns are passing moratoriums. Community groups are showing up to zoning meetings. Local leaders are pushing back in ways they weren't 3 years ago. Now, in the interest of being accurate here, the companies building these facilities aren't sitting still on this. Microsoft announced recently that it's become dramatically more water efficient over the past 2 decades, cutting its water consumption rate by 90%. Compared to when it opened its first facilities in the early 2000s. The company now uses 0.27 liters per kilowatt hour, about 3 times better than the industry average. Microsoft also says it's replenished more water globally than it withdrew in its 2025 fiscal year, an early milestone towards its 2030 goal of being water fully positive. Google is making similar commitments, pledging to replenish 120% of the water it uses at data center sites by 2030, and committing $17 million to water stewardship projects across 7 states. In 2025, they say they replenished more than 7 billion gallons through 165 water projects across 97 watersheds. Those are real numbers. Real investments and efficiency improvements at this scale do matter. But here's the tension. Efficiency per unit is improving, while the total number of units is exploding. You can become 25% more water efficient and still end up using dramatically more water in absolute terms if you're building 10 times as many facilities. That's not a gotcha, that's just math. The UN projects that if AI's share of data center electricity consumption rises to 40% by 2030 as expected, AI-related water consumption alone will hit 9.3 trillion liters, enough to cover the annual basic domestic water needs of 1.3 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa for an entire year. Efficiency gains, while real, haven't changed that trajectory. Now, and I want to be careful here because this is where conversations like this tend to go sideways. This isn't an argument against AI. I use it. You probably use it. It's already embedded in most of the software, apps, and services we rely on daily. It isn't going anywhere. And before we get too precious about AI's water footprint, some context matters. A single hamburger takes more than 400 gallons of water to produce. A cotton t-shirt, more than 700. The 16,000 golf courses in the United States can each use anywhere from 100,000 to 2 million gallons of water per day. So if you're looking for water villains, there are larger ones. But those industries have been doing what they do for decades. We've had generations to understand their impact, regulate them, push back on them. AI is different. It's scaling at speed we've never seen before. One report projects that by 2028, data centers could consume 12% of all the electricity used in the United States. In Virginia alone, they already account for nearly 40% of the state's total electricity consumption. The water is part of that story, and the concern isn't just the volume, it's the location and the transparency. Investors are now pushing Amazon, Microsoft, and Google to disclose site-specific data on water and power consumption. One analyst put it plainly, these companies haven't been disclosing enough about their water use and the impact on local communities. When a data center moves into a drought-stressed town and starts drawing millions of gallons a day from the same aquifer that town depends on, that's not an abstract environmental issue. That's a neighbor problem. So where does that leave us? Every time you use AI, every prompt, every image, every generated email, there's a real physical cost happening somewhere. Not to you, to a community, a water table, a town that may not have consented to any of this. That doesn't mean you should stop using it, but it does mean the conversation about what AI costs, really costs, shouldn't be just about jobs or data privacy or whether the models are biased. It should also include, where does the water come from? Who's approved this? And who's living downstream? Those are questions worth asking, and the fact that most people have never thought to ask them, that's exactly why videos like this exist. If you found this useful, there's more where this came from. Drop your questions in the comments, what you want me to dig into next, and if you're new here, stick around.